My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 28 years old. For most of my life, I felt like a guest in my own family. People often say that a mother's love is unconditional. Growing up, I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe my mother loved me just as much as she loved my older sister, Jessica. But every year, every birthday, every family gathering seemed to prove otherwise. Jessica was 2 years older than me. She had bright blonde hair, a beautiful smile, and a confident personality that attracted attention wherever she went. Teachers loved her. Neighbors adored her. Relatives couldn't stop talking about how talented she was. And my mother? She treated Jessica like the center of the universe. I was the quiet daughter, the one who stayed out of trouble, the one who always followed the rules. Yet somehow, I never felt important. One of my earliest memories happened when I was 8 years old. Our school was holding a talent show. For weeks, I practiced a piano piece every afternoon. My fingers hurt from rehearsing, but I kept going because my mother promised she would come watch me perform. The night of the show, I kept looking toward the audience. Every time the auditorium door opened, my heart jumped. But she never came. Afterward, I walked home, holding my participation certificate. I tried not to cry. When I entered the house, I found Mom and Jessica sitting on the couch eating pizza. "How was your recital?" Mom asked casually. I stared at her. "You forgot." She looked surprised. "Oh, honey, Jessica had soccer practice. I couldn't be in 2 places at once." Then she turned back to my sister and continued their conversation. That was the first time I remember feeling invisible. As the years passed, things didn't improve. Every achievement of Jessica's was celebrated. Every achievement of mine was expected. When Jessica got a B on a science test, Mom bought her ice cream because she had worked hard. When I earned straight A's, Mom barely looked up from her phone. "Good job," she would say. Nothing more. By the time I was 12, I stopped bringing home my certificates to show her. I kept them hidden in a drawer instead. One Christmas made everything painfully clear. That year, I desperately wanted a bicycle. I had spent months circling pictures in store catalogs and dreaming about riding around the neighborhood with my friends. Christmas morning finally arrived. Jessica opened a brand new laptop, then a designer handbag, then several expensive outfits. When it was my turn, I unwrapped a knitted sweater and a pair of socks. I remember forcing a smile because I didn't want anyone to see how disappointed I was. Later that night, I overheard Mom talking to my aunt on the phone. "Jessica deserves the best," she said proudly. The words cut deeper than she could ever imagine. What about me? Didn't I deserve something too? When I was 16, years of hurt finally boiled over. One evening, Jessica and Mom were laughing together in the kitchen while I washed dishes alone. Something inside me snapped. I put down the plate and looked directly at my mother. "Why do you always choose Jessica?" The room fell silent. Mom stared at me as if I had asked a ridiculous question. "What are you talking about?" "You always support her. You always spend time with her. You always buy things for her. It's like I don't even exist." For a moment, I thought she might finally understand. Instead, she laughed. actually laughed. "Emily, stop being dramatic." Those 4 words broke my heart, because they told me something important. My mother didn't just ignore my pain. She didn't even see it. That night, I cried quietly in my room while staring at the ceiling. For the first time, I accepted a painful truth. I might never be the daughter my mother wanted, but I couldn't spend my life chasing love that was never freely given. I didn't know it yet, but much bigger heartbreaks were waiting ahead. And the worst betrayal of all would come from the person I wanted to love me most. After graduating from high school, Jessica and I took very different paths. Jessica was accepted into a prestigious private university in Chicago. The tuition was expensive, far more than our family could comfortably afford. But somehow, Mom found a way. She paid for everything: the tuition, the dormitory, the books, even Jessica's monthly spending money. Meanwhile, I was accepted into a state university just 2 hours from home. I still remember sitting at the kitchen table with my acceptance letter in my hands. I was excited, proud, hopeful. Maybe this was finally my chance to make Mom proud. "Mom," I said, smiling, "I got accepted." "That's wonderful," she replied. For a brief moment, my heart lifted. Then I asked the question that changed everything. "Can you help me pay for college?" Her smile disappeared. She looked uncomfortable. "Honey, money is tight right now." Money is tight. The same woman who had just spent thousands on Jessica's education suddenly couldn't help me. I nodded and pretended to understand. But inside, I was crushed. Over the next 4 years, I worked harder than I ever had before. I woke up at 5 every morning to work at a coffee shop before classes. After school, I worked at a bookstore until late evening. Some nights, I was so exhausted that I fell asleep while studying. There were times when I survived on instant noodles because I couldn't afford anything else. But I never complained, because I knew nobody was coming to save me. I had to save myself. During those same years, Jessica seemed to live a completely different life. Every time I checked social media, I saw pictures of vacations, concerts, expensive restaurants, and shopping trips. Mom often visited her. Sometimes she would call me afterward. "You should see how well Jessica is doing." She never asked how I was doing, not once. After graduation, I found a marketing job in Columbus. The pay wasn't amazing, but it was enough to support myself. For the first time in my life, I felt independent. I rented a small apartment, bought secondhand furniture, and slowly started building a future. Then one Saturday, Mom called. "Emily, come home this weekend. We need to discuss something important." Her voice sounded unusually serious. I drove back to my hometown the next day. Jessica was already there. The 3 of us sat around the kitchen table where so many painful memories had begun. Mom took a deep breath. Then she smiled. "I've decided to sell the house." I looked around the room. The family home. The house where I grew up. The house Grandpa built with his own hands. I couldn't imagine it being gone. "Why?" I asked. Mom folded her hands together. "Because Jessica and her husband want to start a business." I didn't understand. What does that have to do with selling the house? Then she said the words that changed everything. "I'm giving them the money." The room suddenly felt smaller. I stared at her. Surely I had misunderstood. All of it? Yes. My heart pounded. The house was worth nearly $400,000. It was the most valuable thing our family owned, and she was giving every dollar to Jessica. I looked at my sister. She avoided eye contact. Then I looked back at Mom. "What about me?" The question came out as barely a whisper. Mom sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "Emily, you have a good job." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's your explanation?" "Jessica needs the money more." There it was. The same excuse she had used my entire life. Jessica needs more. Jessica deserves more. Jessica comes first, always. Something inside me finally broke. Not cracked, not weakened. Broken. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Years of disappointment flooded through my mind. The missed recitals, the forgotten birthdays, the unfair Christmas gifts, the college tuition, all of it. I realized I had spent my entire life waiting for my mother to choose me, and she never would. Without saying another word, I walked out of the house. Mom called my name. I kept walking. Jessica tried to stop me. I kept walking. For the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving because I was hurt. I was leaving because I was done. As I drove away, tears blurred my vision. But beneath the sadness, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. I no longer needed my mother's approval. I no longer needed her love to define my worth. And from that moment forward, I made a promise to myself. If nobody was willing to invest in my future, I would invest in it myself. After leaving my mother's house that day, I made a decision. I would stop looking backward. For years, I had wasted so much energy wondering why I wasn't enough for my mother. Why Jessica always came first. Why I was always the second choice. But those questions never brought me peace. So I focused on something else, my future. I threw myself into work. At first, it wasn't glamorous. I spent long hours in a small office handling marketing campaigns for local businesses. I stayed late when everyone else went home. I volunteered for projects nobody wanted. I studied new skills on weekends. Slowly, my hard work began to pay off. Within 2 years, I received my first promotion. Then another, then another. For the first time in my life, people were recognizing my efforts. Not because I was someone's daughter, not because I was someone's sister, because of what I had accomplished on my own. At age 26, I took the biggest risk of my life. I left my job and started my own marketing agency. Everyone thought I was crazy. Even some of my friends warned me. "What if it fails?" they asked. The truth was, I was terrified. But I had spent my entire life surviving disappointment. Fear didn't scare me anymore. Failure didn't scare me anymore. Staying stuck scared me. So I took the leap. The first few months were difficult. I worked from a tiny apartment with an old laptop and a folding table. Some nights I barely slept. Some months I worried about paying bills. But little by little, clients started coming. One client became 5. 5 became 20. Then 20 became 50. 3 years later, my company was earning more money than I had ever imagined. I bought my first home, a beautiful house with a large front porch. The kind of home I used to dream about as a little girl. And the best part? Nobody had given it to me. I had earned it. Meanwhile, life wasn't going as smoothly for Jessica. Through relatives and occasional social media posts, I learned that her business had struggled almost from the beginning. The money Mom gave her disappeared faster than anyone expected. The company accumulated debt. Investors backed out. Employees quit. Eventually, the business collapsed completely. I felt sorry for her, but I didn't feel jealous anymore. The resentment that once consumed me had slowly faded. I was too busy building my own life. Years passed. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. I was finishing a meeting when I noticed the caller ID Mom. I stared at the screen. We hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, but something told me to answer. Hello? For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then I heard her voice. It sounded different, older, fragile. Emily? My stomach tightened. Yes. She took a shaky breath. I need your help. Those 4 words hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she explained. A serious medical condition had forced her to stop working. The treatments were expensive. The insurance wasn't covering everything. Most of her savings were gone. Jessica couldn't help because she was struggling financially herself. As I listened, a storm of emotions filled my chest. Anger, sadness, confusion. After everything that had happened, she was calling me. The daughter she had overlooked. The daughter she had ignored. The daughter she had never chosen. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted her to experience the same helplessness I had felt for years. But another voice inside me spoke louder. It reminded me of all the pain I had carried. It reminded me how much I hated feeling unwanted. And in that moment, I realized something important. If I responded with bitterness, the cycle would never end. A few days later, I quietly paid her medical bills. Every single one. I didn't tell anyone. Not Jessica, not relatives, nobody. A week later, Mom called again. This time she was crying. Emily, she whispered, why would you do this for me after everything I've done? I stood by the window of my office, watching the sunset. My eyes filled with tears, because for the first time in my life, my mother sounded truly broken. And deep down, I knew something had finally changed. The woman who had spent years overlooking me was beginning to see me, really see me, and soon she would reveal a truth I never expected to hear. A few days after paying my mother's medical bills, she asked if we could meet. I agreed. We met at a small park near her apartment. It was a quiet autumn afternoon. Leaves drifted gently across the grass as families walked nearby. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then my mother looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Emily. The words caught me off guard. My entire life, I had dreamed of hearing them. Yet now that they had finally arrived, I didn't know how to respond. Mom lowered her head. I failed you. My chest tightened. she continued speaking through tears. For years, I convinced myself that Jessica needed me more. I thought you were strong enough to take care of yourself. I told myself that every time I missed your piano recitals, every time I ignored your achievements, every time I chose her over you. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But I was wrong. I sat quietly, because deep down, this was the conversation I had waited for since childhood. Mom reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph. It showed Jessica and me as children. I couldn't remember the last time I had seen it. You know what's strange? She said softly. When I look at this picture now, I don't see two daughters. She paused. I see one daughter I spoiled and another daughter I neglected. The pain in her voice was real. For the first time in my life, I believed she truly understood the damage she had caused. Not just to me, to our entire family. Over the next several months, we slowly rebuilt our relationship. It wasn't easy. Years of hurt don't disappear overnight. Some conversations ended in tears. Some ended in silence. But little by little, we started healing. Then, one evening, Mom invited me to her apartment. When I arrived, she handed me a large envelope. Inside were legal documents. I looked up, confused. What is this? My will, she replied quietly. My heart sank. The reality of her declining health suddenly felt much more real. Mom explained that after selling the family home years ago, she had invested part of her remaining assets. The investments had grown over time. Combined with other savings, the amount was substantial. Then she told me something I never expected. I'm leaving everything to you. I stared at her. What? She nodded. I owe you that much. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Then I slowly shook my head. No. Mom looked shocked. What do you mean, no? I took a deep breath, because I knew exactly what I wanted to say. Mom, that's the same mistake you made before. She frowned. You gave everything to Jessica and hurt me. I gently placed the documents back on the table. If you give everything to me now, you'll hurt her. The room became silent. Mom's eyes filled with tears. For a long moment, she simply stared at me. Then she whispered something I will never forget. You became a better person than I ever was. A few months later, my mother passed away peacefully. Losing her hurt more than I expected. Despite all our struggles, she was still my mother. And I was grateful we had found a way to heal before it was too late. After the funeral, Jessica and I sat together in a quiet coffee shop. For the first time in years, we spoke honestly. Not as competitors, not as rivals, as sisters. Jessica admitted something that surprised me. She had always known Mom favored her, and secretly, it made her uncomfortable. I didn't know how to stop it, she said through tears. I just kept accepting it. For the first time, I saw that favoritism had hurt her too, just in a different way. A few weeks later, we honored Mom's final wishes. We divided everything equally, 50% for Jessica, 50% for me. Fair, balanced, right. One evening, I stood on the porch of my home watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. and I thought about everything that had happened. The loneliness, the heartbreak, the years spent feeling invisible. Then I realized something. The greatest gift my mother left behind wasn't money. It wasn't property. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a lesson about love. Because when parents give everything to one child and forget the other, everyone loses. The neglected child carries pain. The favored child carries guilt. And the parent often carries regret. Real love isn't about choosing one child over another. Real love is about making sure every child feels seen. Every child feels valued. Every child feels loved. And for the first time in my life, I finally did. My name is Emily Carter, and this is the story of how I stopped chasing someone's love and learned my own worth.